Jay. Good morning, Kelly. How's everybody doing?
Hey, Tony.
Very well. Tony, I read your stuff all the time. We're not...
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, we're not always on the same, but I got to tell you, this is 2 columns in a row. You and I are on the same page.
Oh, that makes me happy, Jay.
I'm sure it does. So, Ferguson, back in the news with its court system.
Yeah, so Fred Watson is a guy that I wrote about earlier this year who was in the Ferguson report, although you wouldn't have known it at the time because he was anonymous. He was one of the people who told the Department of Justice his story. And his story is that he was a defense contractor. He's an internet cybersecurity guy. Never been in trouble with the law, has no record, has a, very good job, had a high defense clearance, and was playing basketball at Forestwood Park, which is where some of his family lives. He spent a lot of time growing up in the Ferguson area. He's lived in a couple different places in St. Louis. And he's playing basketball, and he gets done playing basketball, and he's sitting in his car watching a baseball game elsewhere in the park, just cooling down. His clothes that he's going to change into are in the back seat. His driver's license and stuff is back there. And a cop comes over and asks for his Social Security number. And, this is a guy with a high defense clearance. He knows his rights. He's like, no, I'm not giving you that. And the cop starts, this is, Fred's story. The police report reads a little differently. But the police officer harasses him, etc. Anyway, he ends up getting charged with about 5 different charges, all stemming from allegedly having windows tinted too darkly. Well, his car was registered in Florida, and the tinting was legal where he lived and where the car was registered. Anyway, he gets charged with all these things. He hires an attorney. He starts to fight it. And at some point, and this part is unclear, but at some point, Ferguson basically says, you're guilty. And he's convicted of guilt on a couple of the charges. His attorney had been negotiating for a possible plea agreement, but had never agreed to one. And the prosecutor at the time, Stephanie Carr, thought that they had an agreement. They entered a guilty plea on his behalf. It's in the record as being guilty. They took his bond money. And he's like, no, I never said guilty. So he hires another attorney. This has been going on since 2012. Earlier this year, he hired Arch City Defenders, and they filed, as Jay, as an attorney, a pretty rare motion to try to get the guilty pleas taken off of his record, withdrawn.
Right.
And the judge, my column this week, the judge from Ferguson ruled on December 12th that indeed those guilty pleas would be withdrawn.
And so the importance of that is that as a high security clearance employee, the guilty pleas prevent him from maintaining that security clearance.
Correct. He lost his security clearance. He lost his job where he was working as a contractor at National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Now the guilty pleas have been withdrawn. A court date has been set for February 21st. And so the question is Ferguson going to try to prosecute this guy on 4-year-old minor charges that sure appear to be harassment and are sort of a symbol of some of the problems with law enforcement and the court system before August 9th, 2014. It would be my hope, I know it's Fred Watson's hope, that they drop these charges. This man's already been through enough, and I know he intends to try to regain his security clearance. He's not tremendously positive he's going to have success because that's a whole nother series of issues in trying to deal with the federal government once one of those things gets revoked. But here's a guy who worked in an important field and has been unable to work in his field. He's been doing odd jobs, trying to take care of his kids.
Yeah. We have about 1 minute, Tony, but this is one of those stories that shows the real trouble with the policing for profit side of the courts. Do you see it moving in the other direction?
I do see it moving in the other direction, and I tried to point out, and it's important because I've had some folks from Ferguson previously criticize me, I think this movement on this case is a positive development. I think it shows some movement in terms of Ferguson going the right direction and recognizing that policing for profit is not what police officers want to do. It's not what the legal system exists for in the judicial system. And so there is movement going on in this region and in the state in understanding that you can't just arrest people to try to collect charges because the police department and the judicial system and the entire municipality happens to be short on its budget.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tony Messenger, 2 columns in a row that I've agreed with. Always read them. Let's see if we can go for 3.
Let's go for 3.
All right.
For the Jake Ansler hat trick.
Very good. Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist. It is 8:29 KTRS.
Happy New Year.
Hi, this is Jeff Lapidus, a retirement coach. If you